going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to actually start with rural development. And remember, this is recorded, so it's good because people will know what's going on with rural development. We don't get to hear from them very much. And this is Carlita. Where are you at, Carlita? Melissa. Not Marlita. Carlita's right here.
That's my middle name. That's fine. So I'm located in Montana, in a town called Lolo, just out of Missoula.
Well, let's go right ahead. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon. My name is Melissa Ciliento, and I'm the Western Region Field Operation, FOD, team lead for USDA Rural Development. And me and my team service the properties located in Montana, Washington, and Wyoming. There we go. There. Our leadership team includes, for the Field Operation Division, includes Carissa Steers, Jason Church, Lori Wazinski, Dan Rogers, and Michael Resnick.
Melissa, sorry to interrupt before you go any further. Would you mind popping into full screen there for us?
On the
PowerPoint?
Oh, gotcha. Let's see.
Along that top row of options where it says slideshow. Right below the file name.
Oh, okay. On the PowerPoint itself?
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. So.
And then just go ahead and say, play from current slide.
There?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So, so when I click, am I just going to use arrows? I wonder. Okay. So we service 13 states, which are colored blue on this map. And the regional mailbox corresponds to the map color for each region, so if you needed to send a document or something like that out and you weren't sure who to send it to, you could send it to this mailbox and someone would make sure that the correct person got it. There we go. So the Western Region Field Operation Division leadership include our Regional Director Becky Meyer, our MPA Kelly Jones, and then we have team leads, which are Heather Malone. She services Team 1 out here in the West. Nate Rydell is Team 2. Philip Dawson is Team 3. And of course, I'm Team 4. And Robert Hawks, he is the lead for our Troubled Assets team out here in the West. So the multifamily housing had a pilot last year. It was called the MPPIP. Now it's called the MPIP. That's because it's not a pilot anymore. We had success with this pilot program last year, getting properties inspected of various ways. We did virtual. Some of us were able to go in and do it in person as a servicing specialist. And then we were able to do these contract these other inspections, which they just went wonderfully. They were very well organized. And so this year we plan on using that same method for the contracted inspections to do around 3,000 properties this coming fiscal year. Okay, so let's see, service. Okay, RD properties require routine servicing such as year-end actual submissions, which are due 90 days after year-end. That's for the actual. And if you're doing a proposed budget, those are due 90 days before year end if there's a rent increase, and 60 days if there's no rent increase. And you usually will get a letter for the proposed budget season a few weeks before it's due that really spells out what's required. And what I put on this page is just a little sample of that letter, so you know what we're expecting, what you need to provide. Evidence of general liability, property insurance, workers' comp, fidelity, they're due usually annually, and you can email those directly to the servicer. You do not have to mail them hard copy. docs such as IOIs, Attachment 3B, management certs, affirmative for housing, marketing plans. Those are just due when they're coming near expiration. So if you are able to, get them done just before, that's ideal. Just little things that we chase around and try to help you guys get them in as close to on time as we can manage. HOTMA. So there are some changes in how income from assets is calculated and the threshold in which their imputed asset income is required, increasing from 5,000 to 50,000, and only if actual income cannot be calculated. Dependent calculations are going to stay at 480 for each dependent as of January 2024. However, this is going to be adjusted annually in accordance with the Consumer Price Index and rounded down to the next lowest multiple of 25. The elderly is going up though. They're increasing from 400 to 525 as of January of this year, and then following the same method, it'll be adjusted annually in accordance with CPI and rounded to the next lowest multiple of 25. And lastly, the deduction for medical expenses is actually going to change from medical exceeding 3% of annual income to 10%. But there will be a phase in hardship relief that existing RD tenants can receive. Okay. Okay, so the Production and Preservation Division, they're the ones that handle the 538 guaranteed loans, 515 transfer and assumptions, NPRs. I think they also handle the subsequent loans and things of that nature. And then there's like branches within it. So when they get the application, they have the pre-processing, which is processing, report, and review, underwriting, and the closing branch. And then if you have a prepayment application, that's actually reviewed by the portfolio management branch. And if you do have a situation where you decide you want to apply for prepayment for incentive or to get out of the program or to sell to a nonprofit, you can reach out to your servicer and they can ask Wilma Marcotte's team to send you an application or even try to schedule a meeting if you need to talk about something in regards to it. This slide provides a snapshot of the Production and Preservation P2 pipeline. Rental assistance decoupling. So the agency is continuing to seek statutory authority to decouple the 521 rental assistance from the 515 mortgage. This allows rental assistance to stay with the property if the 515 mortgage matures or is terminated. This is a critical preservation tool. 30,000 units will lose RA due to maturing mortgages by 2030 and an additional 50,000 by 2035. So we're continuing to respond to the manager's notes in the fiscal year 23 appropriations bill. Congress required the agency conduct at least 3 listening sessions to get stakeholder feedback. And they've had 2 in-person listening sessions in June and 2 virtual that were held in July. Okay. So this slide provides a list of the NOFAs and NOSAs. The 538 guaranteed loan applications, you can submit those throughout the year. The next Super NOSA funding round is expected in December of 2023 and may include Section 515 preservation, NPRs, farm labor housing, new construction and preservation, and 515 and 514 subsequent loans. Okay, so the Build America, Buy America Act, enacted as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, focuses on maximizing the federal government's use of goods, services, products, and materials produced and offered in the U.S. all non-federal organizations receiving RD financial assistance for infrastructure projects are now required to exclusively use iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials manufactured in the U.S. In accordance with BABA, USDA has determined that de minimis small grants and minor components will be waived from the requirements of BABA. Under such waivers, small grants below the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently set at $250,000, shall not be subject to BABA. So for additional program information, you can visit this homepage. And if you have questions or comments or feedback, you can reach out to Dan Rogers, and I have his email there, or Stephanie Virgin. Okay. So if you have, this is in regards to MINC. So if you have issues or you need to do a rental assistance check, you have a late fee and you need, or an overage waiver, you need to set up a pad, things of that nature, correct a social security number, then you would call or email this tan area here for the servicing office, which was formerly known as NFOAC or CSC, but it's the servicing office, and they're the ones that could help you with that. If you have an issue with, a specific question about a budget you're putting in, numbers, what can you put in? What line does it go in? If you have a rental assistant need, like you need some additional RA, or if you need some regulation interpretation, that you can reach out to your servicing specialist on, and they should be able to help you. Or you can email that FOD West here in the blue mailbox. It's a general box, and they'll get it to me or to the servicer. Or, if you're reaching out to another team within the Western region, the same thing would go for that. And then lastly, if you're having problems, like you need to set up your EOTH, or you have a new employee that needs to get EOTH, or you're having a hard time with a MINC form, it's actually of that nature, you would call the RD help desk or email them. But in any case, you could always call your servicer first, and she or he can direct you to the correct person. So this one, okay. So this slide provides a central phone number for RD and a link to multifamily housing RD site that provides program details and further resources. The third link takes you to the list of RD properties and gives you the corresponding servicing specialist. If you're not sure who it is, that can be really helpful. And lastly is that multifamily housing main mailbox again. And if you haven't already, sign up for Gov Delivery. And you can do that using this link, just control and enter, I believe. But they'll get you, once you're signed up for it, you'll get the latest program updates, invitation to stakeholder meetings, and even trainings. So a lot of times I set up trainings for new NOFAs or NOSAs that come out. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm sure these folks will get it to me. They also have a copy of this PowerPoint that they can share. Thank
you so much, Melissa. That was really good information. We really
Thank
appreciate it. And she was able to do it even though she didn't know if she would be working this week. Under a lot of stress. We really appreciate everything you do. Is she able to
thank you.
Is she able to stay on if she can? If you'd like, stay on. You can see the rest of the presentations. Has HUD appeared?
I don't believe so. No, they have not.
Well, okay. We're going to go on to Carlita, the CMS director, and she's going to tell you what she knows, because she knows HUD pretty well. A lot of stuff from HUD, because that's kind of the stuff they do.
Can we say well enough?
Well enough. More than well enough.
Hi, good afternoon. I apologize. I did not wear my heels today. So here we go. So here we go. I am Carlita Mendez. Thank you, Michael, for the brief introduction. I do identify as she and her and contract management services. We are a vital part of Bremerton Housing Authority. We have been the performance-based contract administrator since December 2000 for the state of Washington. So I will use the acronym PBCA this afternoon. As it rolls off of my tongue, know that I'm referring to our role as HUD's contractor. By a raise of hands, can I see how many of you work or interact with CMS on any of your multifamily HUD properties? This means that you have an active HAP contract and in the state of Washington, and we process your vouchers, we set rents, we renew your HAP. Oh, great stuff. Okay, so we have a good handful of you here in the room today. I am here to provide a high-level update of what we have going on in CMS and how it impacts you, what you can look out for, and I hope to receive some feedback, most likely after the session as time allows, to help us better support you in certain areas. On the slide that you see on your screen today, we have the different topics and the areas that I will be covering. So my slideshow consists of one slide. First, I'm going to get into HOTMA, and this is going to be brief. I'm very, very thankful for our previous presentation that shared some details with regards to HOTMA. If you haven't yet, please be aware that HUD released a new notice just last Friday on September 29th regarding implementation guidance for HOTMA. What we are seeing are conflicting information and guidance from HUD from the last notice compared to their first notice. So what we are doing in CMS is we're internally assessing the changes. Sean is taking a picture. Everyone pose. See, that's what happens if you take a picture and I'm up here and don't have my heels. So we're assessing what the changes to HOTMA means to CMS. And secondly, how can we better assist the owners and management agents we work with while you also adopt HOTMA changes. So we're still assessing, we're mapping out our plans. This is where I do want to hear from you sometime during the conference or this evening. Stop by our booth. We have an exhibit booth, and we'd like to hear how we can help you ramp up or become more familiar with HOTMA. Like I said, we're doing the same things internally with CMS, and we are going to be preparing materials and tools for our owners and management agents, and we'll be posting those online. Most recently, we also secured training dates in partnership with our Washington State AMA group. We'll be providing HOTMA training virtually with AMA, and that would be performed on January 16th. So keep an eye out for updates from the Washington AMA group that would be announcing that virtual training. The topic of that specific HOTMA topic will include tenant selection plans and EIV updates that you need to be aware of to comply with HOTMA. If there are any other things that you'd like me to include, again, mention that to me or our staff that we have at our exhibit booth, and we'd be more than happy to accommodate that while we plan our owner and agent training program. We've also secured a second training date along with our Washington AMA group. The second virtual training we'll be offering will be on March 18th. That topic will be on how to close your MOR on the first response. So I don't know which topic is going to be more popular than the other, but again, please keep an eye out for announcements on both of those dates. This next bubble that I have on our screen is tracks updates. Tracks 203A should be coming in December. Should that be italicized, underlined, and bolded? It should be out in December. So we are preparing for HUD's tracks update. If you haven't already, please make contact with your software provider to ensure that they are ready to roll out the tracks 203A changes, and you are ready internally as well, because you should be seeing software changes to comply with 203A. So that's our tip from our voucher team. They've already noticed a few issues related to 203A. So if you are concerned, even after receiving support from your software provider, please feel free to contact the voucher specialist that you work with, and we can help we will try to help walk you through some of the changes. We can see what those changes look like on our end of the system. We may not be able to really walk you through how your software looks like on your end, but we may be able to help connect the dots. If we certainly can, we will. Next, special claims. So Michael asked if I could introduce a little bit of audience participation. So here's the first audience participation that I have. We're not going to do Zumba, but that was the first request. But I want everyone to guess and throw out a few numbers. So special claims. What is special claims? Special claims is a process in which if you have a HAP contract and CMS services that HAP contract for HUD, we will pay out additional funds through a special claim request. We'll pay out special claims for a vacancy loss, as well as unpaid rent and unpaid damages. Once we receive a packet, we have 30 days to review, approve, and return that approval back to you. So in Washington State, and here's where the guessing game comes in. In Washington State, we, CMS, we're assigned 307 properties in Washington State, over 14,000 units total. In a year, on the average, how many special claims do you think we receive for Washington State? Throw out a number. 100, 20, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. What I would love to see how that would look like, right? This is money on the table for you or to walk away with, right? For you to leave or to walk away with. On the average, CMS receives 8 special claims for Washington. 8 special claims for Washington. I know. You know, per year. Yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on, let me go back to my numbers. Month. But still. Right? Yes. So come on. If you are curious, if you need assistance with submitting a special claims, they're processed by our voucher team. So please contact your voucher specialist. They can walk you through the process. They can answer any questions. It does at times feel like a laborious process, but I can tell you that if you're following all of the occupancy requirements when a tenant leaves, you already have the required documents to gather and submit to us so that we can kick back that approval and you can then receive your funds. Once we approve, you have 60 days from receiving that approval letter to request the special claims payment on your voucher. So then the request on the voucher will come back to us, and then we'll send your payment through a monthly subsidy payment. So we have resources on our website under vouchers and special claims. We have a special claims checklist for both vacancy loss and unpaid rent and unpaid damages. So I highly encourage you to utilize the checklist that we have on the website. We also have links to the HUD Special Claims Guide and other special claims materials on the website as well. I have a question. Do you want me to keep going and take the question? Celeste. So the question was, and I'll repeat the question because I'm trying to be a good girl today. The question was, is there a period that you can go back? I believe it's 6 months. Yeah, I believe it's 6 months from the move-out date. So I'm 90% certain. So for example, the move-out date is here. We need to receive that packet 6 months after that move-out date. Okay, so your time starts ticking at that move-out time. Okay. Any other questions with regards to what I've covered so far? Great. Repayment agreements. Repayment agreements is something that is changing that's connected to the Tracts 203 changes. The HUD Form 52670 Part 6 is a HUD form that is changing that impacts 2 things. repayment agreements, as well as tracking family self-sufficiency escrow account balances. So if you're not familiar with that, please take a look at what those forms will look like and the changes that that would bring. Once we've transferred over to Tracks 203A, you will need to transmit a baseline for all repayment agreements still active. So if you have a resident that is still living in the property that owes money, or if they no longer reside in the property but are still making payments on a repayment agreement, then you'll need to do, in essence, a baseline RPA. After 203A, we are able to pull out a report out of our system to let you know what active RPAs you have. If you'd like us to pull that report for you, contact your voucher specialist. We can do that, and then that might help you reconcile once I'll move on to 203A. We can help you with the transition. We're also helping ourselves, so please let us know if we can help. Next, MOR final rule. So the MOR final rule impacts the frequency in which you will see or have a management and occupancy review performed on your property. Before the MOR final rule, we were, for the most part, performing MORs annually, once annually. With the MOR final rule, any MORs performed on or after September 22nd, performed on or after September 22nd was considered an MOR baseline. And we, or all PBCAs across the country, were required to perform MOR baselines for all properties that we were assigned. We will complete our Washington State baselines in January. That's our expected time to complete all of our Washington baselines. Thereafter, we will follow a risk-based approach that HUD has imposed over MORs. What is that frequency? So we may or may not visit you at your property once a year, but it's determined by this criteria: your last MOR rating, a risk rating status that's determined by HUD, and the contract type that you are under. So if you are operating a mark-to-market property, you must have an MOR every year. And if there is a change in management agent or ownership, then we are required to perform an MOR 6 months after that role transfer. So if you are in acquisition, or if you're currently considering taking on a property that has a HAP contract, take that into consideration, because that's going to be something that you can expect within 6 months. Next, OCAF rates. We are still waiting for HUD to release their FY 2024 OCAF rates. OCAF factors impact eligible properties with contract anniversaries on or after February 11th, 2024. So when OCAF rates are released, we will place an update on our website so that you know that they are available. And there are other listserv services that will also do the same and let you know when they're available. And according to my slide, it looks as though that's the last bubble that I have. But I do have one last update, and this is an ask or a call to action that we are working through during this week, especially during our Housing Washington conference. So I want to share HUD's latest efforts to introduce what is called a cooperative agreement as a way to work with housing providers like us. In 2018, HUD tried changing contracts with public housing authorities from annual contributions contracts to cooperative agreements. In 2018, they tried doing this with public housing authorities, and public housing authorities, as well as industry groups like NARO, FADA, and CLAFA, opposed cooperative agreements. Cooperative agreements changes the contractual relationship between HUD and service providers like Bremerton Housing Authority, like CMS as the PBCA. And so it can and most likely will immediately disrupt the flow of voucher processing and payments, contract renewals, setting rents, and if the government should face a shutdown, services and payments can be expected to stop. Or under the current contract structure that we're in, we are still able to make those payments based on remaining appropriations. So what is our ask? we have created a petition letter, and we're asking those housing professionals who are interested in supporting the opposition for Section 251 language in the Senate THUD appropriations language that will allow cooperative agreements to be used for housing services like the PBCA contract. This was something that they attempted to do in 2018 with all public housing authorities across the country. That movement was stopped, and now they're trying to make a second attempt, and they're sliding it under the appropriations language. And so, smart move on HUD's part, but we're hoping that we can circumvent that once again so that we can continue the integrity of our program and continue the services that we provide you every day. That's all that I have. Thank you, Michael.
Well, did you learn something new? Next up, we have TyeRae. And I don't think HUD's joined us, so that may not be a possibility, but I know there's a question about HUD and home and how they react with each other. We'll get to that. But let's first hear from kind of the home and the other sides of the house for that. So
while they do that, can I act as a commercial break because I forgot something? So the QR code that was in the center of my image gives you, sends you directly to the online letter petition, or you can stop by our booth, because I know that we brought the slide down, but please stop by our booth. We do have QR codes available on the sliding screen, and you'll be able to sign the petition electronically when you visit our booth. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm here, as Michael stated. I'm grateful to be here. Hi, back there, who is just waving at me. I think that's my crew back there in the corner. So, hi. As Michael said, I'm TyeRae Guined. I'm with the Washington State Department of Commerce Multifamily Housing Unit, and I am the portfolio manager overseeing asset management and compliance. And I am just one of multiple teams in our unit. Many of you have worked with the Housing Trust Fund and Home. How many are familiar with the funding that we provide to the properties? Perfect. So we have different, what I like to call branches or arms in our unit. And I kind of am at the tail end of it. But we have our first team is our housing investment team. And they're the ones who see all of our NOFAs, so our notice of funding availability. Then we have another team that is our housing development team, and that's our project management teams. So some of you work with those individuals as you develop your properties. And we have our contract fiscal team that goes between several teams. One of my teams is also asset management workout, and then compliance asset management team. So I'm going to focus today on kind of the compliance asset management side and asset management side of what we do. And I'm going to start with looking ahead for 2024. I focused on two topics, looking ahead, because we do have some changes coming for commerce, and then also some compliance issues that we've seen throughout this last monitoring cycle to bring to individuals' attention. And this slide here, I really like to kind of throw up there because a lot of people don't realize all the different things commerce does. We don't just do housing, we strengthen communities. For example, my program, we're in every county in this state, which is exciting. But we not only build housing, we provide infrastructure, we have our local government division, we have our community outreach, energy. So this slide really kind of shows you everything commerce does beyond what you guys might just interact with us. So looking ahead. So one of the things we hear is everybody loves our home program and what we often refer to as our National Housing Trust Fund program. We also hear how people would really like to have more direct compliance support. So in looking at that, one of the things I've looked at is all of our federal projects, and I'm looking to move them into more of a portfolio split. This means you will have a direct point of contact for your home and National Housing Trust Fund property, and I refer to it as a National Housing Trust Fund because the state is also called Housing Trust Fund. If you go look at HUD's website, please note you'll never find something called National Housing Trust Fund. The goal with this shift is to ensure that when you guys have questions, that you have that direct point of contact, because home, not a difficult program, it's just unique, and same with the Housing Trust Fund on the federal side. It's unique, it has differences than what you see with your other programs. So it is my hope through this shift that direct point of contact, you guys will get your questions answered quickly, be responsive, and then we ensure we meet all of the necessary compliance components like that approval of rent utility allowance before they go into effect. The other thing that we have coming forward in 2024 is we're going to be working through a rollout of handbook updates on the state handbooks. We have 3 handbooks. For the state one, we did this last ledge session have an update to our RCW. Our handbook is our policy, which is driven off of our RCW. So you'll see the statutory criteria and funding guidelines update. We'll also update our application guidelines for those of you who are working with the development side to help streamline that through the NOFA process, and so you kind of know what to expect. Same with contract development and management. So there's a management part that our project management teams handle once you get your award. This will help ensure that everybody's on the same page and they know what our policies are as they're going through the development of their properties. And then the last but not least, compliance and asset management. As far as the work our unit directly does, that section will also be updated for all of our state-funded properties. And any changes to our federal, because of HOTMA and Inspire as needed, will also be updated. Looking ahead, so I did mention Inspire. Just last Friday, I believe it was, HUD released a notice in regards to Inspire inspection standards. We're going to take advantage of that delay. We got all of our federal properties inspected prior to the October 1st. We'll ensure that all of our properties are inspected prior to the next October 1st. This is going to allow us time to ensure all of our policies, our contracts, handbooks, and our staff, we're all in alignment with what to expect with Inspire. And then our staff is trained accordingly to do the best job. We don't know yet if we're going to apply Inspire across the board to all of the portfolio. That's to be determined. On the federal side, it depends on how our written agreement is. Our program's almost 40 years old. We have several different contract templates. This could have a different impact based on what's there. So that's to be determined what that is going to look like. The other thing is we're going to try our best to coordinate with other funders on our inspections. What we did hear a lot this year from individuals is, why are we having so many inspections by so many different individuals? We had an inspection from HUD. They came out and monitored us. And we talked about our joint efforts with individuals such as Seattle Office of Housing and the Commission on not being a burden to the residents and, of course, all of the individuals in this room on our inspections. HUD made us aware that for our properties with Home and National Housing Trust Fund, there would have to be specific language in the MOU, and then for the Commission, their contract with their third party in order for us to take that. That came to be, and then there was the changes with the Commission where they're now having to do 100% because of the changes that have transpired at the IRS level. We are trying to still work with our local funding partners, City of Bellingham, Snohomish County, King County, Seattle Office of Housing, that whole group, City of Tacoma. But on our federally funded properties, you may have 2 sources of federal funds. You would still potentially see 2 inspections. If you have tax credits, you're going to have 3. So if you have 2 PJs, participating jurisdictions, for your federal funds, plus the Commission, you potentially are going to see 3 inspectors that year, that monitoring cycle. Not intentional. The one thing we are doing, though, here at Commerce is if the Commission has come out and they've inspected your property, we're going to scale back our monitoring a little bit, and we're going to focus just on our home units. We'll still have to do the full inspection as far as the exterior common areas, buildings, building systems, all of that. But we're going to focus on our home units and our National Housing Trust Fund unit. So when you have a large property doing the 20%, this will be a scaled approach. So hopefully it won't be as invasive to the residents, because that is one of our priorities, is ensuring they're not burdened just because of the housing they're living in, but also all of you who work hard every day to do what you need to do. And we don't want to be adding another layer to that. So we are listening. There is just some things beyond our control that are preventing us from not making this burden occur. Okay. So the next section I'm just going to run through here is avoiding noncompliance. One of the things I cannot stress more than anything is we have 3 handbooks, as I mentioned earlier. 1 is being updated, and the other 2 will update accordingly with HOTMA and Inspire. It's important that you do download those, take a look at them, and become familiar with them. Those are our policy That is what we monitor to. That is what we conduct our file reviews. That is what our annual reports are done. I would highly encourage you to look at those, ask questions. How many of you know that we have Income and Asset Appendix B in our handbook? Oh, okay, it does. So we have an entire Appendix B in our state handbook for all of you to assist in running your properties, knowing what we're going to be looking for when we're conducting the file reviews. And we created this several years ago, and even though we did send out the information and we try and communicate it, I don't think individuals are quite aware yet that it's there. So in order to help, the last thing we want to do is when we come out, it's a partnership. We don't want to come out and then have you have a 20-page report because you're not in compliance with us, and we do run into situations like this. So in order to ensure that, I asked you to go out, kind of review the website, look at our handbooks, and become familiar with them. And then when you have those differences, like home requires 2-month source documentation, ask those questions. What does this mean? Because I have this other requirement over here. That's what we're here for, is to support you in the work you do. The other thing is applying the correct student rule. So for home, National Housing Trust Fund, and our State Housing Trust Fund, HUD Section 8 student rule applies. This is another one that we run into when we're doing our monitoring and our file reviews. We see the tax credit form. Well, that's great, but you're in a home unit or you're in a state HTF, so both of those student rules do apply. We tend to find this non-compliance often. There is a form on our website that you're welcome to use. You don't have to use our form. You have another funding source that has the HUD rule and it requires all of them. You're welcome to use that, but if it doesn't meet our requirements, then you'll run into a problem. We had that happen with our home addendum. We have a very specific home and National Housing Trust Fund addendum on our website. We had another local PJ in the property. They opted to use this other local PJ's home addendum. Unfortunately, it didn't have all of the required elements to it. We didn't get out there because of COVID. Monitoring happened. We had to have that corrected, right? So ensuring that you have the correct home addendum. Again, that portfolio shift that you will see should help avoid this in the future. This is a big one right here. So you are required, per the CFR, to have your rents and utility allowance approved annually by Commerce or your local PJ. If you don't obtain approval, we ask that you refund the rent to the residents. And we're seeing this as we dive deeper and deeper into this. We ask that you send us a 90-day, submit it to us 90 days prior to the effective date. That gives us 30 days to review it. If you know your effective date, you have to give notice 120 days. If that changes, whatever that looks like, you need to ensure that's to us ahead of time. When you're submitting this request, you have to submit your utility allowance along with all backup documentation. Some people just send us, oh, here's our utility allowance, and this is our rent. Unfortunately, we'll request the backup documentation. One thing we're doing, if any of you have recently received a home award and contracted with us, or a National Housing Trust Fund award and contracted with us, we're actually putting the required utility allowance method and the rent limits in your contract. This is a conversation that I've had with Melissa in regards to how can we make it work for the tax credit properties, because they're not looking at utility allowance at contracting like we are for these federal programs. So there is that collaboration going on that's kind of behind the scene. It's important. The other thing we run into with our utility allowance is individuals are choosing to use Public Housing Authority utility allowance on projects that were had funding committed on or after August 23rd of 2013. It's not allowed. So this is another non-compliance issue that we're continuing to run into. And another one that we see is the requirement of the wait list for home and National Housing Trust Fund. You are required to maintain a property-specific wait list, and you are to fill your units from said wait list. We do run into a problem when coordinated entry is involved, and we are working with the technical writer from HUD. HUD has put in a request for guidance, but if you've noticed in any of the most recent home, the ARP funding, can't remember the name of it, but they literally stated that you can use a wait list to fill your units for that funding, but for a traditional home, you cannot use coordinated entry. You cannot use coordinated entry to fill traditional home units. So just keep that in mind as you are looking through your funding streams as you're developing these properties, because what we're seeing is individuals are developing these properties with these different funding streams that are requiring them to use coordinated entry. but you can't do that for your home units. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're working through this. Questions and concerns. So WebAR support is a great way to get in contact with the compliance asset management team. That is manned by one of our individuals who provides technical assistance on WebARs, but then can also filter your questions to the appropriate individuals within the compliance asset management team. All of your home and National Housing Trust Fund rent and UA approval forms, which the forms are located on the Commerce's website, should be sent to homecompliance@commerce.wa.gov with all backup documentation. Annual reporting, we're going to move into 23 here shortly, so you'll see this email address will begin to update for that, and it'll be 2023 annual reporting email address for all of your documentation. One thing I want to talk about is when we do our annual reporting, I'm going to go back to that rent and utility allowance. We actually have a way now in our system, all of your rent and utility allowance information that you submit into WebARs comes into our database. We are inputting your rent approvals into our database, and they will ping if your units don't line up, if your rents change, if your utility allowances aren't the same. We'll get that flagged, and it'll be easily for us to see. The other way we're seeing it is all of a sudden we get a rent and utility allowance approval, and the rents that you guys are requesting changes to don't match your prior approval or what was reported in WebARs. So we look at these as they go through. So I can't stress that enough to just kind of talk about those. So this is kind of just a brief looking ahead for 24 and some of the non-compliance issues. The other thing I do want to kind of talk about is we do have some funding coming available. Any of you track like our housing preservation program, that NOFA should be coming out here soon. I highly encourage any of you who have some of our older properties in your portfolio to be aware of that, to potentially help cover some of the much needed capital needs. I believe that's going to be released in December. So on our Housing Trust Fund website, if you can go into applying to Housing Trust Fund, there's also a way to sign up for notifications when those are released. I would encourage you to see that funding that's coming available. So thank everybody for today.
Thank you, TyeRae. As we're waiting for Lacey to set up, I just had a question for you. How many of you are a local county funder? Please stand up.
Assuming this is you. Cool.
Any local city funders? Oh, hey, there they all are. Where are y'all from? Seattle, great. Well, you'll feel right at home with our next presenter, because one of the biggest of the funders, as far as having properties, I'm sure, is probably Seattle. And you have some really interesting stuff to share, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm going to fix this because I did wear my heels today, and maybe we should have swapped before this. I'm Lacey Barker. I'm a senior asset manager with the Seattle Office of Housing. I am now very concerned, seeing as how the title of my slideshow is gone. So we're just going to hope and pray that the rest of the stuff is on here. So, as far as the Seattle Office of Housing goes, a lot of times when people see the city of Seattle, they think Seattle with a big C. Even as far as the Office of Housing goes, a lot of our partners don't know that there are, technically on the asset management side, there are two teams. We have two very different programs. We have the rental housing portfolio. And when we are referring to this, we are referring to all things that have been funded by the Seattle Office of Housing. Those are our partners that have gone through the NOFA process. They have signed a loan agreement, a regulatory agreement. If there are home funds, because as TyeRae and Commerce has a pot of home funds, so does the Seattle Office of Housing. So we have a lot of partners that know that they have home funds, but they don't actually know who is administering them. So it might be Commerce, it might be the Office of Housing. So definitely making sure that that you know the difference between the two. We recently just came out with the compliance manual, which is another area where our requirements live, as well as our A&F plan, which you can find on our website. In addition to the rental housing portfolio, which a lot of you may be familiar with, we also have our incentive programs. This encompasses the multifamily tax exemption program, incentive zoning, mandatory housing affordability if As a developer, you decide to choose the performance option. And yes, our terrace covenants, which there are not very many of them, but it is a completely separate covenant. So in a lot of these incentive programs, you are going to see these in market rate buildings more often, where a certain subset of your units have any one of these different covenants. However, in maybe a handful of our buildings, a few hundred units, there is that overlay. And something that we have been trying to stress to a lot of our partners is even if you are funded and you have a loan and regulatory agreement on the rental housing portfolio, but you also have another layer of the incentive programs, you are still having to treat those almost as two separate funders and have to lean on whoever is the most restrictive. In the past, some of the incentive programs have had higher affordability, higher restrictions, and so you've been able to lean very heavily on the rental housing portfolio as far as your AMIs, your set-asides, things like that. Whereas now, especially as we have been extending a lot of our incentive programs, and as each program comes into play, the affordability is getting deeper and deeper, and so now some of that has flipped. So you really want to be mindful about the different programs that you have in your buildings when you work with the Seattle Office of Housing. A lot of the requirements around these, the incentive programs, you are looking in your MFTE final agreements, you are looking at the Seattle Municipal Code, various land use covenants, and then the incentive program also has a compliance manual. So we have 2 compliance manuals on our side, or for our organization. So in looking at those 2 different manuals, the rental housing portfolio, we just came out with a new manual. It theoretically should be effective 9/1, so just recently. However, we've discussed very, very recently, as in within the past few days, about extending this, and instead of having it go live and be a hard requirement on 9/1, extending it to 1/1/2024, especially as we've heard a lot of your feedback and as we work with our other funders, just to make sure that our programs do work together and are not being too conflictive with each other, and that it's not becoming too much of a burden for our partners that are trying to operate the buildings out in the field. The incentive program, their latest version, I think, was in April and both sides are going through various reflect and correct periods where we look at new code that is coming out through City Council, where we look at new policies. As things change, we are trying to keep up with things just as rapidly as you guys are trying to keep up with things. And so there are updates that are coming often. With the rental housing portfolio, our compliance manual is mostly reinforcing policies that have lived in your loan and regulatory agreements that you've had for 20 years. One that not everyone is familiar with is the mandatory and optional rent increase policy. This is where when a household goes above the restriction level of their unit, how and when you apply certain rent increases that are in relation to their actual income. We also have a CPI moderator on a lot of our projects, which limits the amount that you can increase somebody's rent in a house that is staying year over year. The Seattle Office of the rental housing portfolio, we do have a student policy. We do allow students. We have a very specific student policy. And so this manual is really providing more support for our providers to know how to implement that. We have actually for the first time really begun to give guidance on our home program. In the past, we've relied really heavily on what Commerce has put out. And as we've seen through our own monitoring, that we need to provide more support for our partners, and so this is what that is doing. And then we are also reinforcing affirmative marketing. And for those of you who don't know what that is simply a process in which you are actively participating in your marketing to community-based organizations and finding potential applicants who would not necessarily always know that you have an available unit or how to apply to your units. On the incentive programs side, their manual also reinforces their student policy. Our student policies are aligning. We've worked really, really hard to not only externally make sure that our policies are not conflictive, but also internally as we have 2 separate programs. Their manual does reinforce things such as rent setting. Oftentimes when we have partners in the market rate area of housing, they don't necessarily always know what is considered when we are discussing gross rent. So really reinforcing that policy so that our partners are not having to then pay that money back when they are overcharging rents, and then also reinforcing the affirmative marketing policy as well. Lots of things are changing with the Office of Housing. On the rental housing portfolio side, we are looking at Inspire as that's coming down the pipeline. However, we cannot give a definitive answer right now as to when that will shift or on what properties that will shift, because we do work really closely with some of our partners and making sure that we are not inspecting to a certain standard that our partners cannot accept, because then they would still have to come back into your properties. And again, that's where you would see multiple inspectors, multiple site visits for multiple funders. And we're trying to reduce that as much as possible, especially for our residents, because in the past we've had some tenants say, I've had 5 inspections this year, especially as we came out of COVID, when the fire marshal was coming back, when owners were coming back, when all of the funders were coming back. They were seeing several sets of people coming into their homes, which can be a little invasive. And we are trying to do our best to remove some of that burden on our residents. So potentially, Inspire in 2025, we're gonna work on that together on the back end. One of the big changes with the rental housing portfolio is we are now allowing source documentation. And it's not necessarily a requirement, whereas in the past you've seen the totem pole of supporting documents. We are now saying you can do whatever works best for your tenants. For some files, it might be easier to get third party, or you might need to get third party, or you have another funder that requires third party verification. On others where that's not necessary, or it's easier, it's simpler for your staff that are working on site with the actual applicants. If there's an opportunity where they can accept third-party source documentation, we are allowing that now to streamline that process a little bit more so that income certifications are not taking weeks, they can be done in a matter of days. We are moving towards full recertifications, and I know that this has been a major pain point with a lot of our partners. We do apologize. However, we all answer to somebody. The Seattle Office of Housing, we get information requested of us from the mayor's office, from city council, from policy advisors. Everyone is looking at the data. And if we don't have accurate data, we cannot accurately report. So we are not accurately and fully engaged in some of the policies that are being driven in our local area. So that is a big change, and also part of why we are extending our rollout from 9/1 to 1/1/2024. We are introducing streamlined certifications, and for those of you who have HUD properties, you might be familiar with that information and what a streamlined certification is. That is on a household that has a majority of their income is fixed income. Instead of having to do this invasive recert every single year, you are applying a COLA instead. And that then takes a lot of the weight of the recertification off of, especially your households whose income really is not changing year over year. So these are your Social Security households, TANF households, a lot of those sources. We have also introduced an equity-based rent increase tool. So for any of you who were at the stabilization class earlier on, looking at just sort of rent stabilization, this is not a requirement, but it is a tool. So in partnership with actually having full income certifications, you can now look at what your households are actually earning and see this household, their income has not gone up very much. So we might only apply a CPI to this household. It'll be a much smaller increase. Whereas the households that are either have the higher income or over income, you are able to give them larger increases because they can support it. This way, your households are not being overly burdened too much, as well as on a property level, you are still able to generate that revenue so that you guys can also pay your bills, because we all know that the cost of operating our buildings are going up and up and up every single year. Also on our website, we now have new forms and owner compliance tools. The equity-based rent increase tool is an example of this. We do have affirmative marketing templates to help you guys know what it is that we are looking for when we're asking for certain documents or certain plans or certain forms. Instead of that just being an arbitrary, like, hey, this is what we need, we are saying this is what we need. This is a format that works very, very well so that you know exactly what to submit. Another example is our life cycle cost analysis or your CNAs. We are giving templates to those so that it takes less time, less capacity on your end to provide the things that live in your loan and regulatory requirements. On the incentive program, something new that is coming out is their additional unit rule. And this one is going to be really important for our partners because in this instance, let's say there is a temporary noncompliance or there's a noncompliance for whatever reason. If you moved somebody in and you miscalculated their income and they really didn't qualify for that unit to begin with, when that noncompliance falls on the property for failing to follow the parameters of the program, then you have to actually add an additional unit. So if you had to have 32 MFTE units before, and there is an action of noncompliance, then you have to add a unit, and now you have 33, 34, 35, however many units in relation to the noncompliance. So this is where being in compliance and understanding your programs is really important. For the MFTE program, now that we are rolling out extensions, which the state just approved, our incentive team is doing file audits for those extensions. And then regular audits are actually just now starting and resuming at the same rate that they used to in 2024. How to avoid noncompliance. A lot of these are going to seem very, very basic, and you guys are going to be like, well, duh, we know this. I promise you, we're saying this because we're not necessarily always seeing it out in the field, especially because we have so many new staff. We have so many new property managers, new leasing agents. So it's our job to continue to reinforce some of these expectations so that you guys know what is expected of you on the property side. So specifically for rental housing portfolio, pre-inspect your own buildings. You guys know when we're coming out. Take the time to walk your buildings in the morning before we come, the day before, pre-inspect so that you know what to expect, so that when we do get there, you are not being caught off guard and you know what to address early on. Update your WebARS contacts. We are communicating to the properties based on who you guys have put in WebARS. So when a property manager changes, when an owner changes, make sure that you're updating those email addresses and those contacts. Oftentimes, we are sending out annual report letters, we're sending out notices of inspection, and it's going to an old staff member. So then when we are showing up or when that response clock starts in relation to an annual report letter, it's going to the wrong person, which is causing some of that noncompliance. And then make sure that you are attending the portfolio and SDCI partner trainings that are starting in 2024. The affordable housing world, there are certain nuances that we just have to deal with. There are also a lot of tenant landlord Seattle municipal codes that are changing. They're constantly changing. And I'm not a lawyer. I cannot necessarily tell you what to do with all of these changes, but our partners with the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection can. So we are partnering up to make sure that anybody that attends our trainings is getting both the code-based and the program-based knowledge that they need in order to effectively monitor or effectively run their buildings. On the incentive programs, please just make sure that your leases, what you're saying that you're charging for rent on your lease and what you're actually charging and your files, that they match. Yes, this seems like very basic. It is happening out in the field. So just make sure that you're double checking and crossing T's and dotting I's. And then again, notify the Office of Housing when your staff changes so that they know who to contact and who to double check with when things change. similar to some of the monitoring that CMS does as far as coming out 6 months after, we are also doing a lot of the same changes. When a new management company is coming in that has never worked in within our programs, we are coming out. When somebody is deciding to self-manage, we are coming out to make sure that we are having a check-in with you guys 6 months after to make sure that we are able to address anything that we need to really, really early and get you guys on a really good path, as well as make sure that we are providing whatever support that we can so that you are positioned to operate your buildings the best that you can. And then as far as across the city, both of our programs goes, if you don't know, ask questions. We are actually really, really responsive, and we would prefer that you guys ask questions so that you are implementing different things properly than saying, I don't know, after being out of compliance or overcharging rent for several years. Reaching out to the Renting in Seattle line, a lot of the people that contact me about various questions that they have are not actually anything that I can advise them on because they're tenant-landlord related items, such as rent increase notices, specifically what language needs to be on a notice to enter or on a rent increase notice. That information actually really does need to come from the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection because that is who is doing that level of enforcement. Pre-audit your files. If it does not make sense to a staff member of yours that did not originally do the file, if it doesn't make sense to them, it's not going to make sense to me or any of my team members. So if there is a question and you guys identify that, you have the opportunity to fix it before we get there so that your issuance of noncompliance is being brought down and so that we can get through this without necessarily needing follow-up. Read your agreements. Oftentimes you have owners that are signing these legal agreements and that information is not being passed down to the people that are operating your offices day to day. Make sure that everybody has the same information. Read our manuals. Both of our teams do have listservs that you can sign up for, so as things are changing, new policies, you're able to find out in real time. And then educate yourself on the applicable programs. And finally, if you have questions or concerns, these are our email addresses. There are 6 of us asset managers total. We have our own portfolios, and as you need, reach out to your asset managers and we will do our best to respond to you right away. Thank you so much.
So, as you can tell, the city of Seattle is in the house, but this is live television. Now, the Friend of Housing Awards starts at not right away though, I think, but pretty soon. With your indulgence, if you'd like to hear a quick summary of the tax credit situation, we can do that. If you need to go, that's understood. But a lot of you have tax credit properties, and I think you probably want to hear it. And that phone call, yes, that was Eileen, and she's having computer problems. Have we all been there? And and if you have any other questions you need to ask of us and resolve, we can do that after the thing, on the way to the thing. And you're not missing the meal. The food is being served independently. It's not a sit down. Oh, that's still Melissa from Rural Development. So she's gotten an earful. Did it? Yeah, they were waiting. Okay, well.
Oh man. It's been a long
We'll
day.
let Melissa go, and then we'll say hello to HUD. Believe me, the
Did I
feds
hear
are
my
having a hard time right now. Are you there?
Yep, did I hear my name?
Yes. Was it? Who's this? Is this Melissa? This is the other Melissa. We're going to have the other Melissa who does tax credits from Wishvic.
Oh, okay.
The other Melissa, yes, from another state agency. All right, I don't know why it's doing this, but
It's there.
oh, it looks fine up here. All right, never mind. Oh gosh, it's late in the day. I know you're all ready to go, so I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. I am Melissa Donahue. I'm the manager of the Asset Management and Compliance Division at the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. And these are a few top non-compliance issues to look for in LIHTC housing and some updates. So LIHTC inspections, I know there's a lot of heartburn among LIHTC owners and managers around the state right now because we have really had to change some rules around how we are reporting noncompliance. If the property is in its federal compliance period, that first 15 years, any deficiency found from a sink stopper to failing siding, missing sink stopper to failing siding is going to result in the filing of an IRS Form 8823. Don't even worry about, oh, are there going to be deficiencies? I promise you there will be. You will have at least one deficiency. You will probably have multiple. This is just the way that it is. Every property is going to have a deficiency found. Every property owner in Washington state is going to have to deal with this. All 380 inspections that our vendors did over the past year, every single one of those inspections had a deficiency. The thing for you to focus on is curing the non-compliance. Put a plan together, talk to your teams, be ready to go out as soon as you get that deficiency letter from your portfolio analyst at the commission. Be ready to spring into action. You're going to have 90 days. The goal is fix it so that we can issue that 8823 to the IRS in a corrected format. You lower the risk of having the IRS knock on your door dramatically by having us file a corrected 8823. So do not lay awake at night going, oh, are we going to have a deficiency? You're going to have deficiencies. Just acclimate yourself to that. Plan and focus on fixing it. So remember that health and safety deficiencies, they have to be corrected within 24 to 72 hours. That's on the health and safety form. Be prepared to address those issues as soon as the inspection is over. Do not wait for a deficiency letter. As soon as that inspection is over, the inspector's going to hand you that health and safety form filled out. Start fixing those items immediately. Now, frequently cited physical deficiencies at recent inspections. We're hearing a lot about electrical panels with knockouts missing or that are unsecured. Does not matter if they are in locked rooms, does not matter if they are on the roof. Missing knockouts, being unsecured, automatic deficiency. Missing sink stoppers. This is the dumbest thing in the history of UPCS. Sadly, it is a deficiency. You can't even call it level 1. I mean, what? Sorry, I could get off on a philosophical discussion about this. I won't. In any case, it's like the old thing we used to tell people, have your maintenance person with you with a bag of batteries and a bag of sink stoppers. Go around every unit that doesn't have one. Bam, now it's got it. It's noted in the report, but it's a corrected deficiency. Blocked egress, huge issue. Graffiti, huge issue. Broken or overflowing trash receptacles, we are hearing about this at the commission all the time. Please make sure that your outside as well as any internal trash chutes or trash room and your outside trash areas are picked up and clean and do not have overflowing trash. That will be a deficiency. Auxiliary lighting inoperable, another big one. And playgrounds that have been closed or have broken equipment, those are going to be deficiencies as well. To inspire or not to inspire. You've been hearing throughout the conference, everybody's going back and forth. HUD says, October 1st, 2023, you must implement Inspire. Then they turn around and say, oh, wait, we're just kidding. Section 8 has to implement Inspire. The rest of you guys get another year, meaning HOTMA, home, any community planning and development program. So, of course, the tax credit program goes, what are we going to do? And we don't know. The IRS has, of course, not come out with any guidance, And so we are in a watch and wait, just like our other partners who are also patiently waiting for HUD to come out and give additional direction. We're in a wait and see position right now. We don't know what we're going to do. I need to talk with our our vendors that go out and see where they are right now, talk to the other funders, and make sure that we're all aligned for 2024. So stay tuned. Vacant and offline units. This is a really big challenge for everybody. We understand that. If your property had units that were offline or vacant for more than 30 days in the reporting year, you must submit a completed extended vacancy rent-ready report with your LIHTC annual report submission. Units that are offline, meaning they are not rent-ready, for 90+ days are automatically reported to the IRS. If your unit was offline for between 30 and 90 days, we may need to report that to the IRS, but we don't have to if you can provide a complete explanation and timeline of continuous efforts to bring the units back online. If you did a bunch of work during the first 30 days and then somehow 6 months went by and nothing got done, then we're going to look at that and go, well, what happened? Who checked out? And we're going to have to report that. So be sure that you can show continuous effort for those units that are offline 30 to 90 days. Units that are vacant for more than 30 days, list those units on the report. Tell us what you're doing to get those units rented. HOTMA, wait and see. As some of you may know, a lot of you may know, HUD just came out with some HOTMA clarifications, some of which contradict the last HOTMA updates that came out. So everybody's heads are exploding. The commission is in a curious sort of position because, as you probably know, we only administer the low-income housing tax credit program and tax-exempt bond program. We do not do project-based Section 8. We do not hand out vouchers. We are not a home PJ. We do not do CDBG, any of these other things. We are a one-stop shop. And so there is no requirement, technically, for us to be implementing HOTMA right now. So we are, and especially in light of HUD's own, the left hand not knowing what the right is doing right now, we are stepping back and saying, okay, we're gonna wait for folks to kind of get their stuff together and just kind of see how some of this stuff all starts to shake out. So again, we are not making any changes to our compliance manual. As of January 1st, we are in a watch, wait, and see position, probably for the next several months. But again, this may depend on if suddenly HUD comes out with a bunch more, clarification, or miracle of miracles decides to update the 4350 anytime within the next 6 months, then that could affect how quickly we move on that. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact me or your monitoring portfolio analyst. We're here to help as much as we possibly can. Don't be shy. Email us, give us a call. We're here to help. Thank you very much.
So, I think there was something in the chat about differences between home and HUD. So I think there always will be differences between home and HUD. So I think we're in agreements with that. Was that person still okay? We'll just take care of it now.
So the question is really with home and HUD and their conflicts with most specifically the home program lease addendum. HUD doesn't allow us to use it without HUD approval, but HUD won't approve it because of the language that home won't allow us to change. Is there any way to solve this for those properties that are combined?
So I have actually had conversations with Eileen about them accepting the home addendum or having, kind of like they did with the tax credit lease rider several years ago. However, the only way, and there's always a catch, right? Like, we can do that on the state level. Their concern is, in the conversations I've had, is that State Office of Housing may have their one. Fortunately, we had a home subcommittee, and a lot of our other PJs use the same home addendum. I don't know if you guys have noticed the similarities, but other PJs do not throughout the state. So there's some down south that have their own home addendum. And we have one on Eastern Washington that have their same home addendum. It is something we have tried to work on, and it's continually in our radar to work on. It's getting all of the PJs in the state of Washington together to say, look, and Eileen has been great in that conversation and moving that forward. That is our goal, and we hope to eventually get to that point, because I do hear what you're saying. We haven't quite got there yet.
So in the meantime, we're just out of compliance with one or the other?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because, and I don't know if you guys realize this, so when we got monitored by HUD last, they pulled resident files, and they're looking at residents' files, but from a different program perspective. So we have to have that, and sometimes what I'm seeing is people actually have different files set up. So these files don't exist when one funder comes, and these files don't exist when another funder comes. I know that sounds kind of interesting setup, but that is how some individuals have worked around that. Sorry, I promise. This is what I used to say in my other training is, why do we require these things? Because the CFR says so. We're just not here saying, oh, this sounds like a fun adventure to go on. Yeah.
All the time. Can you get this fixed? Well, no, I can't, because HUD and home have to agree with each other at some point to get it fixed.
Yeah, well, home is HUD.
Home is HUD.
Right? But it's just the same thing with coordinated entry. That's another program. We can't use that on home program to fill your unit. So they're just 2 floors apart in DC, by the way, if you guys didn't know that. So they can't seem to.
Which floors? Can we go visit?
I don't know all those details, but it was just one of those things. So thank you for that.
And I had talked to Eileen, and HUD is working out a lot of different things right now. And what she was really going to show was kind of a bunch of links of what's going on. So she wouldn't have had as big of a presentation, say, as rural development did. So hopefully this was useful. You're all such geeks. Compliance geeks. Yes.
So this one, Lacey, is for you. If I remember correctly, in the OH manual, one of the kind of justifications for the full packet research was to make sure we're implementing the mandatory rent increases. Correct? Part of it. The reason I'm asking is because if a property is 100% tax credit where that wouldn't apply, is there any flexibility in then not having us do full packet research on those and maybe going back to self-certs?
Well, depending on the file, if they have fixed income, you're not doing a full research anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But quite frankly, that's not the only reason why. Like I said, we have people that are asking us questions, and we all have to answer to somebody. So as it stands right now, especially with the city of Seattle, when we are, having awards sent our way for data-driven decision-making around policy, we have to have actual data to drive policy and decisions. And it is difficult. There are several reasons why we are moving to that. And it is just, it kind of is what it is right now. We also are not able to make different decisions and policies around, one ownership group versus another. That opens the door to a lot of issues, as you guys know from fair housing, right? When you do one, you do for one, you do for all. Jody, that's for you. What? I think you used to hammer that on me. And so we can't just go around and have, well, you get this policy and you get this policy. So we are looking at the program holistically. Right? So we have to look at it across the board. And like I said, we have to have accurate data. And when we are driving policies based on what our actual households are actually making, Unfortunately, you have to do a full cert in order to determine that. You can't always just go based on somebody's word, because most often when somebody's doing a self-cert, they are using information from whatever they filled out last year, and it may or may not actually be accurate.
Can I add to that?
Oh, yeah.
So, at the state, legislature's looking at our WebArts data. A lot of people aren't aware of that. So, we actually also have a policy for our state HTF that every 6th year you have to do a full certification. They're looking at rent burden, rent stabilization. There's all of this conversation going on right now. Don't be surprised if they're not for long to be the only one making this change. The self-cert does not drive who really is living in our units, and that is what they're trying to achieve is, hey, here's a self-cert year after year. We don't really know who's living in our units. Are they over income and their rents could actually go up, which potentially could drive legislation on the federal level for the tax credit program, because those conversations do occur. So not that they're alone on this, they were just the first ones to do it.
So, and this is something else, and I thank you for your answers. My concern is right now we are having a unprecedented difficulty in getting residents to comply with their requirement to recertify, and I realize that that is just basically something that we have to do, and I totally get that. The sort of the addition to some of the changes that the new manual is requiring is, I am afraid it's going to have a negative impact on keeping some of our population housed and getting people housed, because we have people coming from homelessness with some severe barriers, and my understanding is that at some circumstances we have to complete multiple sets of forms, and then I don't know if it's clear if we would still have to complete self-certs for the commission and then full packet research for OH. So I'm worried about the duplicate sets of forms, which forms are required by, like on the OH site with all the forms are all very similar to the WSHFC forms, but some are slightly different. So I'm wondering which forms can we just use the WSHFC forms on, and which forms are OH and which are both, and the impacts to us and being able to train staff and having us roll that out. And I'm just worried about the impacts to our population as well, because we are having people that we are having to evict because they are not able to comply with the current paperwork requirements. And I think adding this extra layer is going to amplify that tremendously. And that's just my concern as someone that's housing, we're as an organization is housing people coming from homelessness, 30% AMI and all that. So,
As far as forms go, if you have the WSHFC layer, we are pretty much saying you may use WSHFC forms, except for areas where the Office of Housing is more restrictive, such as like the student, right? We have 2 different student rules. So you might use their income certification forms and their student form to make sure that you meet one of their set-asides, but then also our student form to make sure that you also meet our student population. We do recognize that we are seeing an unprecedented amount of people that are not complying. Some of that, however, and whether or not that makes you guys out of compliance, for the most part, please just make sure that you're saving your notices that you're delivering to them so that we know that you guys are doing your part. Some of that, quite frankly, needs to be communicated to City Council, right? Because I can't control evictions. I can't control tenant-landlord laws. And so that communication does need to go out to all of the different parties that be, so that everybody understands where you guys are struggling, so that the different policies all the way across the board, everybody's able to make impacts where they can. And then in areas where, let's say you are having households that you are having to evict for not completing the income cert, you would still have to do that if they're not doing a self-cert, right? So whether it's 2 pieces of paper or 3 pieces of paper or 4 pieces of paper, if they're not doing any of them, you're still going to have to do your part as a landlord to follow up with non-compliance. Some of that might fall on the services for your particular organization services side, making sure that you guys are building those relationships. And if somebody is just simply not complying and you are concerned, like I said, reach out to us, have a conversation with us. We know that the work that you guys are doing is hard, and we are trying to support you as well as meet the needs and the asks that are coming to us. And sometimes it's just hard. And so we can work together to try to work some of those things out, but it requires us having a conversation, right? Just like this, so that, like I said, we have our reflect and correct periods so that we can then pivot where we need to and where we can, so that we're able to meet all of our different requirements and needs. And hopefully we'll be able to devise policies that work really, really well, so that as some of the things that happen in Seattle do expand, right? We see this in tenant landlord law all the time. It starts in Seattle and then it trickles out. So when it comes to affordable housing, if we can figure out how to have really good policies here that work really, really well as they trickle out, it's easier to implement statewide. Does that help?
A little bit. I just do want to have I want to have a conversation with you, definitely, for sure. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah. We will. We'll be reaching out. So,
Yes.
all right. Thank you.
So thank you. It seems we have a lot to discuss, and we got to discuss it. And thank you very much for staying through that. And thank you for that, everything.